Welcome to the Write to Ignite podcast, where we talk to authors who are writing to ignite the next generation with a heart for the Lord. I'm Kyle Morgan.
And I'm Brenda Covert.
Now, Brenda, I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered if dogs and cats fought on Noah's Ark?
I had not considered that thought. I thought all the animals were just peaceful, but I don't know.
Have you ever wondered if animals played an important role in the founding of America?
No, I never wondered that either.
Well, our guest today answers those very questions in her book series, The Epic Order of the Seven. Jenny L. Cote is the award-winning author of the historical fantasy fiction series Epic Order of the Seven. Likened to C.S. Lewis, she speaks on creative writing and history with her passion for making history fun for kids of all ages. Her research has taken her to most revolutionary sites in the U.S., to London to write in Handel's composing room, Oxford to stay in the home of C.S. Lewis, Paris, Normandy, and Rome. She created Epic Patriot Camp with the National Park Service to excite kids about history, research, and writing. Jenny has been featured by Fox News on Fox and Friends and local Fox affiliates, as well as numerous op-ed pieces on foxnews.com. A Virginia native, Jenny now lives in Roswell, Georgia. Welcome, Jenny.
Well, thanks for having me, Kyle Brenda. Great to be here.
Yes. I read that you have a master's degree in marketing.
I do. I do. Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, so I fell into marketing. Who knew?
Because marketing seems to be a aspect of writing that most writers don't want to do. They seem to be uncomfortable with it. So marketing was your first act and it led into writing. Is that how it worked?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I was actually working in the children's hospital in marketing, strategic planning, and business development. And I just had this divine discontent. It was rewarding working, to help sick kids and stuff, but I call it a divine discontent. Like, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. So, yeah, God had other plans for me. And little did I know what was coming.
What about marketing? What about your marketing background do you bring to as a writer? And what is some advice for writers that don't have this marketing background? How can they market their books? Especially as Christians, I think marketing kind of has you know, a kind of a bad rap as far as, it's kind of can be unethical or, exaggeration. And, as Christians, we want to be truthful, we want to be humble, but we also want to let people know our books exist. So, how do you find that balance?
Well, first of all, I would say that to those who think that way, then they must have a problem with Jesus because he was the king of marketing. Didn't he say, go out into the world and tell everybody? Well, that's what marketing is. All it is telling people about your stuff, And so I would say, I always tell people in writers groups and aspiring young authors, you need three things to make it as an author. Think of it as a three-legged stool, okay? You got to write well, you got to publish well, you got to market well. And if you don't have one of those three, your stool's going to fall over. Okay, got the picture. So marketing is crucial, and in fact, I would submit to you that as you are writing, you already need to think about who you're writing for, who your audience is, who is going to be reading this, and how are you going to talk to them about why they're going to love it. So I already think about marketing as I'm writing, but it is literally a third of my job. And a lot of people think, oh, writing is so romantic and all of this. And if I will write it, they will come. And I like to shoot people straight. Guess whose primary responsibility it is to tell the world about how awesome your book is? Authors, it's you. It's not your publisher. I always like to say, even Glenn Beck has signings at Costco. It's just you are the best one to tell the world why people should read your books. And it's fun, when you know how to do it, it's fun and it's easy because you're talking to your target audience anyway, and they're gonna love it.
Have you seen change in marketing strategies over the years from when you first started?
Oh, absolutely. Because, when I got started in this, when the earth was still cooling and y'all weren't even born yet, the art came out in 2008. So a couple of dynamic things were happening. First of all, Amazon was really starting to emerge as the primary source of where people get books, right? And that was when we had strong bricks and mortar stores, Family Christian and Lifeway, right? So, and I am traditionally published with AMG Publishers in Chattanooga. And so, you know, we had those powerhouse stores all over the place. Social media was beginning, but it was nothing like it is now. So those factors alone, can you say, yeah, bricks and mortar are gone, except for the independents. And I love how the indies are hanging on. The indie bookstores, I love them, and I love to have book signings in them. It's awesome. But primarily, Amazon, and then you have Christian book distributors, which I love, which I always like to give them the moniker of the Christian Amazon. Um, and you have a Barnes and Noble here and there, but the main game is Amazon, right? So, that's just been huge. But then social media too. And a lot of people, you know, I hired a publicist twice when my first American Revolution came out. And she was just a drill sergeant who made me, you got to get all the different accounts. And I'm like, oh, because it can eat up all your time. You could do social media posts all day and do nothing else. But she disciplined me and she taught me, how to do it. Am I an expert at it? No. But I do it. And, I primarily Facebook and Instagram are the two main things. And again, if you can embrace it, it's a fast, easy, quick, free way to do it, to tell the world. So yeah, you can't sit back in a cave and expect people to find you. You got to go out to them.
When your first book published, I was born. I was about 14 or 15, and it was it's so frustrating because I was just out of the age gap and or the age group, and my younger cousin, she loved your books. That's when I first heard about your books. And so, I couldn't read what my younger girl cousin was reading, but I wish I had because now I'm
Well,
looking
you
at
should
them
have.
and I
Yeah.
should have. And now
Well, I mean,
they're on my
yeah.
list now.
Oh, well, good. Well, and that's something I didn't see coming. And y'all, when you work for God, God is the most fun boss because he keeps you guessing. You never know what's going to happen. And I have Ephesians 3:20 moments all the time. I didn't see that coming, and it's always bigger than what I ever imagined. And the target zone for my books is like 8 to 12, but the reality is 7 to 98. I mean, I have actually had a couple of 6-year-olds read it. But what I find is, and I didn't expect this, that not only is my target zone key readers, but preteens, teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, families reading them aloud. And then it cracks me up when grandparents buy these books for their grandkids and then they start reading them to vet them. And they're like, well, wait a minute. No, these are my copies now. You'll have to get your own or I'll have to buy another set because they get hooked on them. So I kind of write in a way, kind of like how Veggie Tales did, had a little Monty Python humor that flew over the kids' house with the French peas, but adults get it, kind of thing. So with my second book, I had to start thinking that way. Again, marketing, who is going to be reading this? Parents are going to be reading this with their kids. Um, Older adults are going to read it. So even how I write, I had to expand my audience read. And Kyle, I will especially tell you and your readers out there, the American Revolution books too. Every American on the planet should read them because they have 400 books of, those boring adult history books. All that content is in these books. And, we need to learn our history in finite kitchen sink detail. And that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, I love that. My daughter actually bought one of your books that you autographed for her when she was in her 20s.
Yay. Yeah. Yeah. And kids have grown up with my books. I'm so old that I have kids who discovered them like middle school or whatever, and now they're having kids. And it is really fun to see multi-generational readers. I didn't see that coming. So that's just very cool that the books have staying power, and it's an honor for me.
When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I was always writing stories as a kid. I was 8 and I wrote stories about talking fruit when I was 8. And so when the Art 3 The Fire Cloud came out and I met Phil Vischer, I said, I wrote Fruity Tales long before you wrote Veggie Tales. He said, well, I published mine. I'm like, fine. And I'm like, mother, you didn't save my manuscripts. So, I was always doing this as a kid, but it never even crossed my mind to be an author until, again, I was working at Scottish Rite Children's Medical Center, and our mascot was a Scotty dog. So I bought a Scotty dog and fell in love with Scotty dogs. And then meanwhile, we had a beach place down at St. George Island, Florida. And I was walking up from the beach one day, and our neighbors had renamed their house Now I See, SEA. And I stood in the middle of the street and I said, that would make a great title for a book. And I borrowed a legal pad and I went down to the beach and I wrote what would be the prologue to my very first book, Now I See. I knew nothing about writing, publishing. I was clueless. So I just self-published it with Author House. I think they were called First Books at the time. And this brand new thing called print on demand publishing, that was brand new then. I could only afford to have it half edited. I had clip art as my illustrations. I'm telling you how humble and raw this was. So I threw it up on Amazon, and I had it in our church bookstore. And a literary agent came and visited our church, saw it, and approached me about representing me, Mary Boucher. And again, this just doesn't usually happen. But when God's your boss, I mean, expect the unexpected. And so she's like, do you have anything else? I said, well, I got this idea about this dog and this cat, the Scottish Terrier and this cat meeting on the way to Noah's Ark. And so lo and behold, she led me to AMG. And then I was off to the races writing all these books. Meanwhile, Now I See sat as my book stepchild on Amazon for 20 years. Okay. Until Pastor Jack Hibbs at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, he and his wife, Lisa, discovered it, fell in love with it. And I got an email one day from Pastor Jack's assistant. Hey, Pastor Jack loves Now I See. They want to make it a book of the month next year. Could we get 7,500 copies? And I'm like, my half edited, half baked first attempt at writing, I was very chagrined to this brilliant, most theological mind who I adore. And I'm like, you're kidding me. I said, this book is in no way, shape, or form ready. So I overhauled it, and I was so blown away, honored that Pastor Jack wrote the new foreword. So I re-released it, and it was a wonderful experience to go back and fix all the clip art and make it really look a beautiful book and have a typeset. And it's kind of nice to know what I'm doing now. But my lesson throughout all of that was, do not despise small beginnings, for the Lord loves to see the work begin. Zechariah. And how was I to know that 20 years later, God was like, just start, Jenny. You don't know what you're doing. Just start. And yes, that book led me to my agent, but God's like, in 20 years from now, I'm going to blow you up, with exposure with Pastor Jack and all of this. So let me encourage y'all who don't know what you're doing, put your toes in the river. It'll part. Just start. Just start. I don't care how humble it is. And it's just so fun to watch what God will do with your little loaves and fishes.
Yeah, I think so many authors are afraid they're going to fail, but you're definitely going to fail if you don't ever get started. If you
Right. Of
don't
course
get
you'll
the
fail.
attempt.
Of course you'll fail. Did everybody run a marathon with your first steps of life? I don't think so. I think we might have tripped up once or twice, Isn't that so with anything that you've never done before? Yeah. How do you learn? How do you learn to walk? You take a step, and it's the mistakes. That's how we learn. We learn to our skill in writing, and we learn our skill in publishing, and the things not to do, and the, oh, I got so many mistakes, I need to write a book on it. Maybe I will.
Well, that's hilarious because that was one of my questions is what is a failure that happened to you early on as a writer that you can laugh at now?
I
Well,
don't know if you would call that a failure.
Yeah.
She published it, and then 20 years later, somebody else like, let's redo it.
Yeah.
right, exactly. All right, so that
Um,
was my first failure that became one of my greatest successes. I'll give you a word of caution, something I didn't know, just out of ignorance. Okay, so when a publisher you sign to be traditionally published, you essentially, sign over your baby and your rights, and so I did with AMG. Well, they trademarked my logo, The Amazing Tales of Max and Liz, because that's what, of course, publishers do. Well, I retained audio and movie rights for my books in the contract because I knew that I wanted to pursue these being animated feature films. We can talk about that in a minute. So I approached AMG and I said, "Hey," and my attorney on intellectual property, he said, "Jenny, you need to get that logo back just so you can have it to use for these other things." So I asked for the logo back, and they said, "No, that's ours. We trademarked it," and so they would not give it to me. And it was a very painful, kind of difficult thing. And I essentially divorced myself from AMG. I said, "Okay, well, I need to move on now then." And I developed a new brand because it was a sickening feeling not to own my brand. I
right.
had no control over what I had created on my brand. Book is a different thing, right? Because I have agreed for them to publish the book, but the brand, I lost it. So I came up with a new series title. I already had 6 animal characters on this team. I added a seventh, created a whole plot line of the books called the Epic Order of the Seven, created a new logo, new brand, trademarked it myself, and I actually published with a company called Sound Enterprises, and Jim Caviezel, who played
Oh,
Jesus
yeah.
in The Passion, was one of the owners of it, because God led me to these guys right as all this mess was happening. Published with them, but then they were lacking in the distribution department, and I had a falling out with them. Meanwhile, IMG was like, "Come back, come back, come back." And then God says, "Okay, now that you've gone through this exercise and expanded your whole plot line, got your brand, all of this, I want you to go back and remarry, AMG and ride off into the sunset with them." I was like, "You're kidding me." He's like, "Nope, do it." And so again, it was a hard process to go through, but they welcomed me back with open arms. But I own my brand. So one of the biggest things I can encourage you to do as you go forth in this venture, trademark your brand. If you decide to get traditionally published, make sure you work out that detail that you retain ownership of your brand, because you need it for your marketing. All your stuff, your logos on everything, so that's probably one of the biggest things that I had to learn the hard way. And, AMG, and, it was just hard all the way around, because who wants Discord, and, but it all worked out, and we are living happily ever after.
And you brought
We're getting ready to publish book number 10 in September. So,
and you brought up Phil Vischer. He would have no idea about any of that, losing his brand or anything like that.
right, right, not a clue. Yeah. So, see, it can happen. So, marketing is, you've got to think about the business end of things. And again, you don't know unless something happens or you hear somebody, tell you a story like this.
Okay, how did you get into American history? I'm
Well,
assuming that the first book was not involving American history.
no, well, let me give your listeners the kind of the scope of the series, just so they can, I do that just so they
Sure.
know what it
Yeah.
is. So the Ark 3 and the Fire Cloud started this adventure of the animals heading to Noah's Ark, and they foil a plot by a stowaway who's going to kill Noah and wipe out the human race. So because they saved the day, God chooses this team of animals to save the day throughout key points of human history. So the first six are all biblical. Okay, Joseph, the Christmas story, life of Christ, Acts, through Revelation to the fall of Rome. And now I'm in a 6-book set on the American Revolution because, you know, when John wrote the end on Revolution, in Revelation, God didn't check out of history, right? He kept going. And so I am extremely passionate about the Bible stories, but then about American history. I grew up in Virginia in the heartbed of American history. I was the toddler that went running down Duke of Gloucester Street, you know, on school field trips. But before that, my dad was a pastor of Seaford Baptist Church there, and my mom used to drive through the battlefields of Yorktown to get to the grocery store. All of that imagery, I can see the battlefield, you know, in my eyes. And again, what goes into the first of life goes throughout all of life. And God knew then, you know, when I was a toddler going around on the battlefields, that I would be writing the story of what happened in that hallowed ground someday. So my passion for history was ingrained in me young as a child. And so I wanted to tell America's story. And as I embarked on writing America's story, that's when the assault on America's history was beginning, like with Charlottesville. So The Voice, the Revolution, and the Key was coming out right when Charlottesville was happening. And they were tearing down our founding fathers and our statues. And so look how God, the timing of it. In fact, that's what landed me on Fox and Friends. It happened, the God scheduled the book to release the week Charlottesville happened. And I wrote an op-ed piece about, you know, are we losing our history? Are we tearing down, you know, our history? And so God, you know, again, it's as if God knew it was going to happen.
Oh my, who would have thought?
Who would have thought? How did he know? So yeah, I'm passionate about our founding history, but I'm also passionate about World War II. So I'll be going to writing a series on C.S. Lewis and World War II after this. I'm skipping over the Civil War. I don't want to write about it. It breaks my heart. It's depressing. I don't want to write about it. So, and you know, you got to write about what you're passionate about, what you're drawn to, what you love. So, you know, and I always tell kids all the time in my writing workshops, ever try to write about a subject you hate or can't stand or bored with? It's going to stink. You know, so stay in your lane of what you love and what you're passionate about.
Well, and that transfers too onto the page. People can totally tell.
Totally, right? Oh yeah. You know, I mean, I weep when I write scenes. And there's a great quote like no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. You know,
Mm,
no joy in the writer, no joy in the reader. You know, I mean, the emotions that you emote in every word, it should translate through the page to your readers.
yeah, I love that. You said about, trademarking your brand and building a brand, and I love that mentality of that it's not just a book series, it's more than that. You have, study guides, you have it on audiobooks, you have the podcast, you said you're working on the animated feature films. Like, how important is that to build it beyond just the books?
Well, again, this is where my marketing is coming in because I see the big picture of what this can be. You know, once I just started with the arc, I mean, I had a vision of what it could be, but it certainly grew when I saw the reception to it. You know, we had to go to second printing in 7 weeks. I mean, it was just an
Wow.
instant crazy um, bestseller. So I'm like, okay, this thing has legs. And so my little marketing machine brain just went to town, and it's crucial, and it makes it really fun because you're creating a world for your reader, you know. And what is our objective, authors? Is for your readers to keep what? Reading, right? And so, you know, be bold in your thinking of not just a one-off. Be bold in your think big, dream big of a series, you know. And whether it's, you know, one continual series of characters, or my dear friend Libby McNamee, she's writing women in history. So she's got, the Revolution, she's got a Civil War book coming out, and Dolly Madison, so find a way to make it a brand and a series and build on it, but because you get synergies, they feed off one another. And that was another fun thing about marketing, talking about the audiobooks. You're going to find synergies in your print when you do audio. Let me tell you a cool thing. This just happened this week. I got an email from Audible, and they said, congratulations, we have just chosen the Art to Read in the Fire Cloud to be in our 2-for-1 marathon listing for credits. So they put it up there, they advertise it like, you get 2 books for 1 credit. The print sales soared. The Ark hit #1 again in teen and YA Christian historical fiction.
Wow.
So the print did. And then, the Ark, I'm blown away. I look at my rankings on Audible, and I am up there with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Prince Caspian. It's like, and Wing Feathers, like, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be with my mentor. So, but you see the synergies, when people see not only that you have a print and an audio, I would submit to you that audio is almost, you have to do it now. And it's so simple to do. We can talk about that later too. But also, people want series. And when they see you've got 1 and then you've got 2, that's what they get excited about, because they want series. So think big, dream big.
Okay. Now you said something earlier about film.
Uh-huh.
Do you have anything in the works?
Oh, I got lots in the works, just don't have the money yet. So, well, when you're after, $35 million just production budget, that's not the marketing and publicity.
Wow.
Yeah, no, when I first wrote the Ark, I envisioned it as a movie. I've already seen it. It's fabulous. And Lori Merritt, is my screenwriter. I met Lori at the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference the same day I met my screenwriter. I met my publisher, my screenwriter the same day. And amazing. For 18 years now, we have been pursuing this, and we have had loads of interest studios. We've come, to the 11th hour of contracts and so forth. And then something happened, either a red flag or something fell through, or this and that. But listen, I don't sweat it. Listen, trust the closed doors far more than the open ones, because a closed door is either, I have found in this business for 2 reasons. It's either for protection, to protect you from going down a path that's not going to work out well, or to get you to a higher level that you couldn't get to had you gone in that open door. And I'm not interested in doing some BC grade cheap film. I want it to be par excellence, Pixar, Disney, blow them away quality. Well, and so I've held to this all along. Meanwhile, I've taken the ball down the field as far as I can. The script is written. I have voice talent. The amazing Denny Brownlee does all my audio books, but I know he'll be one, and we've got other people lined up. I've got interested studio distribution, and then the Lord has brought me my dear friend Davy Liu with Can Do Kids. He animated Simba and the Lion King. He did Beauty and the Beast. He was the face of Mulan's boyfriend. Okay, wow. He did Mulan. And so Davy here, God has brought, and he's a dear brother in Christ. He left Disney in the 90s because he saw the direction it was going. And so the Lord just plopped us together, and he has an art film he's working on, different kids' books. Here we have these 2 art films. It's like, okay, well, what do we do? Well, for one, in the secular world, we would be competitors, right? But we're on the same team, and we need 100 art movies out there, right? So, never look at your brothers and sisters who write same Bible stories as competitors. They're not, okay? And so Davey and I, we've just kind of joined forces, and we're just trusting the Lord. We're out there marketing. We're getting, awareness. And when God decides to move, we're ready. Listen, God's got more money than God. Okay. It's a zero non-issue. And and I'll say that for your project too, whatever that is, if you're like, oh, I don't have the money to do this. Well, has God called you to it? Okay, well, then he's going to equip you for it, and he's going to give you the resources you need in the way he wants it done. But I say too, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, they didn't get to see their movies. So if I don't get to see them until heaven, all right, that's fine. They're not my movies. They're not my books. So everybody get your greedy little hands off of if you think these are your projects, if you work for God, sorry, I'm just the scribe. Okay. I just take dictation. You got to remember who really owns this. So let him do what he will in his timing and in his way. And don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
That's a good perspective. Very good. You were a keynote speaker at the Right to Ignite conference, eons ago, and you told us a wonderful story about the time you sat in a historical chair. And I wondered if you could share that with our audience.
Oh, when I got in trouble, that one?
Yeah.
There've been other instances since then. So, all right.
Oh,
So
boy.
I'm getting ready to shatter everybody and, reveal my life of crime. Yeah. So I'm very touchy feely with history. Okay. And when I was writing The Voice or researching The Voice, the Revolution, and the Key, I discovered, and Patrick Henry is my main character, I discovered that he died in a chair. For 2 weeks before his death, he couldn't lay down flat. He had what was called intussusception or bowel blockage, and he was in agony. So he had to sit in a corner chair. If you've ever seen one of these colonial corner chairs, they have a rounded back and a triangle seat. And so I'm like, oh, I got to see the chair, So hunted it down, and it was in Colonial Williamsburg. And so I go to see it at the museum, and they've removed it from the museum. There's just a sign there. And I'm like, well, where's the chair? And they said, well, it's being refurbished to have the seat redone. I said, well, I want to see it. And they said, well, here, fill out this form. So I did. And I went to go see the chair. So my dear friend, Richard, who plays Patrick at Williamsburg, I said, Richard, you want to go with me to see the chair? He said, let me tell you about that chair. He said, it used to be in one of the buildings in Williamsburg where anybody could sit in it. It didn't have ropes around it. It was just sitting there. And I saw the curator at an event one night, and I said, I wish I'd sat in that chair. And she looked at him like, how dare you even suggest sitting in the chair? So I said, so you're telling me my chances aren't good if I ask to sit in the chair? He said, no. I said, all right, well, let's just go. So we go, and I sign over my firstborn to have access to the room. And we walk in the room, and the chair is sitting on this rolling platform. Jenny starts to salivate just looking at it. And it had a new leather seat. Okay, so it was newly refurbished. And so we're, looking around, walking around it and all of this. And Richard asked the lady, do you have the provenance of the chair? And she says, oh, yes, it's on my desk. Let me go get it. Pregnant pause. And she walks out of the room, and I said, go, go. Richard said, go, go. So I sat in the chair. The platform rolls back. She walks in the room, and I'm nailed. And she said, we do not sit on the historical artifacts. I'm like, I know. I was just so caught up in the moment. I'm sorry. I mean, I was just nailed. I was like, they're going to put me in the stocks or in the jail. It was ugly. It was not pretty. Thank goodness Richard was there. And so she starts showing us the provenance and all that. And then finally, by the time we leave, she said, well, I look forward to reading your book. And so I got out of there alive, and I'm like, Richard, I said, good thing Patrick Henry didn't get caught sitting in Patrick Henry's chair. But I got to sit in the chair where Patrick Henry died. So there's my life of crime story.
Oh, if only you had been arrested. Now that would have been publicity. That would have made the book sales even more, right?
Well, there was that incident where I almost was. Two sheriff deputies almost arrested me for setting off the alarm at Patrick Henry's house. Yeah, that was. Well, it wasn't my fault. They had installed the house where Patrick Henry was married in rural Plains, Virginia. My 90-year-old friend Bob said, "Hey, Jenny, want to get inside the house? The state of Virginia was getting ready to turn it into a museum." And I'm like, "Sure." He says, "I have a key to it." So we go up, and Bob puts his key in the door, and we open the door, and we hear this beep, beep, beep. I'm like, "Bob, you got the code?" "Oh, what code?" I'm like, "Bob, they put a security system in this house." So he just starts pressing numbers. I was like, "Bob, you got to have a specific code to turn this thing off." Well, sure enough, within a minute, so the alarm's going off, and I told Bob, I said, "Bob, the cops are going to come now." So meanwhile, we have this very loud conversation for about 10 minutes. "Here's the fireplace where Patrick Henry got married." And then sure enough, two sheriff deputies come banging in the door, pulling guns on us. And I said, "90-year-old man and author, don't shoot." And they're like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm Jenny Cote. Can you step outside, please?" And I said, "Sure." So we walk outside, and I hand Bob my camera. I said, "Bob, get pictures of this." So I explain everything, and I'm like, "I'm writing a book on Patrick Henry. And did you know he was married in this house?" And so I have a hilarious picture. I think it's on my website under The Voice of the Revolution and the Key. So anyway, and I said, "Can I sign you a book for your kids?" So then finally the park ranger comes who knows the code to turn it off. And he handed me his card. He says, "Miss Cody, you need to get anywhere." He says, "You call me first." I said, "Yeah, I'm not going anywhere, Bob, without a code from here on out." So here's the funny end of that story. A few years later, I'm giving a creative writing workshop at Red Hill, and I'm talking about this story. And I show this picture of the two sheriff deputies because Bob took a picture of it. And this woman in the audience knows the cops. And she texted them, and she was like, "Do you remember this crazy girl that set off the alarm at Patrick Henry?" They said, "We sure do." So my reputation is just, it's entrenched in Hanover County, Virginia. So, but I tell these funny stories, and I get kids excited about research because they're like, "Oh, research is such a drag." I'm like, "It is? Well, let me tell you, my crazy adventures." And then I'm like, "See, it's an adventure. You never know what's going to happen, but do as I say and not as I do. Do not sit on the historical artifacts."
That's that's some solid advice I was not expecting.
Yeah, well, I know. Expect the unexpected with me. Yeah.
So I was gonna ask, you were talking about that nobody is a rival, that we are all, working together. So what is an author that you love that what they're doing right now?
Oh goodness, there's several, but Libby McNamee, I love what Libby's doing, and we are two peas in a pod. And in fact, I'm reviewing her book right now, Spy Mistress, about Elizabeth Van Lew, who was a spy for the Union Army in Richmond, Virginia. And so I've been reading it all day, and we write to the same audience of young people to get them excited about history. And so it is a joy for me to support her, and I could see her research, and I'm learning so much. So being a history geek, I love what authors are doing to promote the history and to teach the next generation. And also the other thing that Libby and I did, to mention Epic Patriot Camp. Can I talk about that, or you want to hear about that?
Yeah.
So years ago, I was at Cowpens, historic Cowpens, for the reenactment, which was a huge turning point in the Southern campaign of the American Revolution. If you don't know your history, go look it up. And I met the superintendent for the National Park Service of the Revolution. And I said, "Hey, could I do a program here sometime for kids? You don't have a lot for kids." He said, "Could you do a whole week?" They had just gotten grant money to develop a camp, a writing camp, to teach the next generation how to research and write kids' books. And again, ask big for things. You have no idea the doors that'll open. Just ask. So I developed Epic Patriot Camp. They wanted it to be my brand. They said, "We don't want it to be our little pointy hat guys. We want a fun brand, and your animals." So we developed this summer writing camp, and we did it at Kings Mountain and Cowpens, and Abingdon Muster Grounds in Virginia. And we had about 22, 23 kids to come for 3.5 days, and they would dress out in colonial gear, and they assumed the identity of a patriot or a loyalist. And I taught them how to research, I taught them how to write, and it culminated in an overnight camp out. It was killer. It was awesome. And these kids went from, video game junkies to they couldn't wait to tell me what research they had learned to write about their character. Well, then COVID killed it. And then so I asked Libby, I said, hey, Libby, why don't we try this virtually? We can't offer the in-person experience to make musket balls and camp out and do this and that, but we can help these kids get published. So we had 25 kids who, from 10 to 19, who signed up for virtual Epic Patriot Camp, and we published their first book on Amazon. And we weren't expecting this to do a lot, but lo and behold, Mount Vernon picked it up, the Boston Tea Party Museum picked it up, the American Revolution Museum in Yorktown picked it up, and these kids actually had a book signing. They went from going to a summer camp at the beginning of summer to be published authors at the best American Revolution Museum in the country. And so Libby did that with me, and we did it a couple of years. And I'm excited to tell you about what's happening this summer. We told the alums of the first 2 years, okay, we've told y'all how to do this now. If you really want to grow and expand, guess what? Y'all are going to do it all. And so it's Epic Patriot Camp Independence. They organized it. They did the registration. Two of the older students, they're teaching it, the workshops. They're assigning the characters. They're writing it, editing it. They're publishing it on Amazon KDP. They're going to market it. And so I'm going to write the foreword to it, but it's all them. And I feel that this is some of the most important work I've ever done, because forget my book. Well, don't forget my books, but, I'm inspiring 25 historians and authors. That to me is always think of passing on the baton to the next generation. How are you going to share what you've learned and all these things? So all that marketing, all that stuff. And what's cool is these young kids, these young whippersnappers, they know the social media and the marketing and all that. So they're light years ahead of where we were when we started this game. So being the history junkie that I am, any author that's working on that is what I love and what I gravitate to.
I love that. Now, for those of you who are listening, you can win a book of your choice by Jenny Cote. Jenny was gracious enough to offer a giveaway, and here's how you enter. Leave a review of this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Take a screenshot, and then send that screenshot to contact@righttoignite.com. That's contact@righttoignite.com, and you could be the winner, unless you leave us a 1-star review. 2 stars is fine, but really, 1 star? Come on. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you will tune in to the next episode. Keep writing and igniting those hearts for the Lord.